26th March 2024 was the day I had come back from Osaka in Japan. And the very next day, I had been very excited to go to the gym and see all my friends. And on the way there, something very shocking happened. As I was walking to the gym, an auto driver spat gutka on my leg. The dissonance that I had after coming back from Japan was shocking. I was in a country where every single person is absolutely so organized and so considerate of other people around them. In India, people use their phones on the metro and the train on full blast. In Osaka, people absolutely do not speak on a train. Why? Because they are considerate about everyone else's comfort. While in India, people drive on the wrong side, cross the roads in absolutely dangerous manners. In Osaka, if the light is red and if there are absolutely no cars on the street, people would still not cross the road. And when you experience this kind of contrast firsthand, you start to wonder that when Indians get all of that hate online, is it somewhat justified? In today's video, I'm going to break down just that. Why exactly do Indians have such a horrible image and a reputation online? Why is it that every other country perceives our people as second-class citizens? And here's a spoiler alert. There is just one conclusion to this, and that is Indians cannot have nice things. And the reason is that we put our self-interest above all else. Now, in spite of India being one of the most hospitable countries with some of the sweetest and most welcoming people, there is a lot that is still wrong with our people and their behavior. In this video, I'm going to break it down in three parts. Number one, we'll discuss the way Indians behave online. Number two, we'll talk about India's image and what other Indian creators and Indian public figures are doing to improve it or worsen it. And finally, number three, the way Indians live life. What are the things about Indian society that actually worsens our image in the eyes of literally every other country? After the rise of short format content such as Reels and Instagram and the boom that came with Jio when internet became cheap for everyone, the way Indians behave on the internet was out in the open for the world to see. India is not for beginners. You might have seen this comment on some of the most vile and disgusting practices done by our people. There might be a person standing on a bike while riding it, a person jumping out of the train, a person serving food in some of the most disgusting conditions. And for some reason, our people take pride in it on how India is not for beginners and how an individual living in another country can't even dream of doing things like these. I mean, why would they? They are civilized. This absurd glorification of our citizens' actions is something that leads us to be perceived as extremely uncivilized. Another thing the rise of social media has actually worsened is how racist Indians are. Now, back in 2013, Washington Post had done a study that actually concluded that Indians are some of the most racist individuals out there. In spite of having so much diversity, in spite of speaking so many different languages, being a hub for all sorts of people, Indians are actually shockingly very racist towards each other and everyone else. When we see white people, we call them Gora and try to scam them. When we see someone from Africa, we call them Kalu and make fun of them. When North Indians struggle to communicate in the southern parts of India, we call them Nordi and do not accept them for just speaking a different language. In fact, when Business Tech did a similar study trying to survey the most racist countries in the world, and when the studies of Washington Post and Business Tech were combined, even then India emerged on top. Every time there is a reel on Instagram of any person doing literally anything, there is always a bunch of Indians making fun of them in the comment section. It doesn't matter how fit or unfit you are. It doesn't matter what the color of your skin is. It doesn't matter what language you speak. If you exist, Indians will find a way to be racist towards you. So my question is, if we continue to behave like this online, how on earth do you expect us to not be ridiculed? The second thing I want to cover is India's image and how we are perceived everywhere and what our people are doing to make this better or worse. In this segment, I'm mainly going to talk about creators, and trust me, there is some outrage here. Broadly, if you look at other people's depiction of India, you would see that India is often perceived as an extremely unhygienic and unclean place. For example, look at the show Family Guy, where there's an episode where Stewie and Brian visit India, and look at how India is portrayed there.
I can already smell the enlightenment and tranquility.
It is shown as an extremely crowded place with animals roaming everywhere, flies here and there, and a lot of stench. But wait a second, why do you think we are portrayed that way? In fact, in India, there are so many places that are actually visually pleasing. They're aesthetic, they're beautiful, they're clean, they're hygienic. And this is even more true for the countryside and the smaller villages of India. So why do you think this happens? Well, obviously, the biggest factor is that people tend to focus more on the negatives. But an even bigger reason, in my opinion, are creators. You should see the type of content that Indian food bloggers post. In spite of having such rich food diversity in our country, they would manage to post some of the most unhygienic, the most inedible street food out there. Now, as someone who's lived in India all his life, someone who's grown up in Mumbai, I've eaten street food significant amount of times. And I'm sure if you are Indian, so have you. In fact, most Indians absolutely love their street food. And now, if, as social media portrays it, all of India's food was unhygienic and inedible, then we would all be sick all the time, right? But that's not the case. And yet, food bloggers continue to post crap like this.
तो भाई यहाँ इनके पानी की प्रिपरेशन स्टार्ट हो रही है। जो पानी ये पिलाते हैं गोलगप्पे में वो पानी बनने जा रहा है। ये एक ही तरीके का पानी रहता है, कोई मीठा मांगे तो नहीं, सॉरी सर, हमारे मीठे वाले ग्राहक नहीं आती सर।
And whenever you see these unhygienic videos, there is always comments from people living in other countries like these. And now, while there are places that are absolutely unhygienic and disgusting, these are only a fraction of all of India's street food. And you also need to remember that most places that serve in such conditions primarily cater to the poor. These are enterprises driven by necessity. While food bloggers are busy promoting crap like this and making absolutely crass content, let me remind you that India is also home to this kind of food. So now, if Indian food bloggers had even an ounce of their brain left, they would rather focus on the great parts of India's food diversity. They would focus on repairing this image. And due to the collective stupidity of one online community, that is the food bloggers, our image from being a land of rich food diversity gets reduced to that of an unhygienic mess. But wait a minute, it's not just an image problem. There is also some serious problems with the way Indians behave and just generally live lives. In India, there is an age-old principle called Atithi Devo Bhava. This is Sanskrit for a guest is equivalent to a god. But do we actually behave like that? Every time we see tourists, our vendors try to scam them. Our taxi drivers overcharge them. We look at them with weird eyes. We are racist towards them.
You give him 600 rupees.
No problem.
It's okay, I'll check him.
He will give you 600 rupees.
Coming from New Zealand.
New Zealand guy.
Where are you going?
Paharganj.
Paharganj.
I'll check here.
Taxi sir.
How much is Paharganj?
Paharganj, which hotel you?
Just the main market, Paharganj.
Paharganj. 800 rupees.
How much?
800 rupees.
Every time we see our own people from the Northeast, we call them derogatory terms and call them Chinese. And it's not just us, even our government treats tourists like crap. Look at the prices of the tickets at the Taj Mahal. An Indian citizen has to pay 50 rupees, but a foreigner or an NRI has to pay 1100 rupees, a 22 times markup. This only happens in India. I haven't seen a single other country do this. We are the only country that openly, legally overcharge our tourists. We treat them differently even though they are our guests. When I had been to the aquarium at Osaka, there was one line. Every single person of every single nationality stood in that line and every single one of them paid the exact same price. How do we claim to be a land that preaches Atithi Devo Bhava when we tell our guests that, you know what, since you're a guest, you're going to pay me more money to see the same monument? Another huge reason why we are absolutely obliterated online is that our behavior is downright disgusting. Mostly in the case of women, but also irrespective of your gender, Indians have a habit of staring a lot and not smiling. This is something that actually creates a lot of anxiety, and this does not happen anywhere else. Mostly people mind their own business in every other country. But if you walk on a street in India, most people stare at you. And when you make eye contact and smile at them, they look away. Observe this. Go to a market and see how many people smile at you when you smile at them. Almost all the solo female travelers in India have some or the other safety issue to complain about. One of my closest friends is a flight attendant in one of the biggest airlines in the world. She travels the entire world and always tells me that I get a little uncomfortable when I see a bunch of Indian passengers. Because just when I have been used to not being stared at or not being made uncomfortable, I know that there is very likely going to be one such instance when it comes to this group. In spite of having a great education, we drive in the wrong lanes. We spit everywhere. If you look at the newly constructed Atal Setu in Mumbai, you would see that there were people who actually took their cars and stopped in the emergency lane just to click pictures. They ate food there, they littered there, they spat there. Every time we have garbage in our hands, we throw it on the road. Why? Because that is someone else's job. I pay my taxes, so why should I bother? As a society, we display a lot of entitlement. We think that certain things are absolutely not our jobs, so we should not be bothered by them. In fact, if you look at the Brent neighborhood of London, where a lot of Indians happen to live, you would see gutka stains on their walls as well. A councillor from North London requested the government to ban it because all of the Indians living there were chewing on pan, they were chewing on tobacco and making the walls red. It is our necessity to be comfortable in absolutely every single place without having any consideration for those around us. You would be shocked to hear what I witnessed at my doctor's clinic. There were two benches in front of one another, and there was a woman sitting on one side and she had her legs propped up on the other side as though she was in her own home. And this wasn't a park, it was a doctor's clinic. There are only two main takeaways from this video. As long as we don't change our ways, our image won't change in front of anyone. We would continue to be looked down upon. And number two, if you have a platform that showcases the culture of India and the beauty of it, I request you to showcase all the great parts of it, not parts that would only worsen our image. And finally, it would do us all good to be a little more accepting, a little less discriminatory, and of course, not glorify our failures as a country. And now I'm sure most people would ask me to leave this country after watching this video. But let me tell you one thing, that is not going to happen because I love this country. And I made this video solely for that reason. This country has given me every single thing that I have today. And going forward, my ambitions are centered around building something meaningful here for my people. Now the real question is, do you also do your part? Subscribe to the channel, I'll see you in the next one.